The head of the African agenda at the World Economic Forum, that's Chido, Munyati, says the continent must prioritize anxious and mostly jobless young people to capitalism on the young continent. While the rest of the world is grappling with aging populations, Africa is missing out on the youth dividend. Munyati spoke to our business editor Xolani Mbanjwa on the sidelines of the 54th World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
We are at the 54th World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and the big question, or at least one of the big questions, is Africa's place at this particular Congress, the 54th Congress of the World Economic Forum. And I'm joined by Chido Munyati, who is the head of Africa and the fellow at the World Economic Forum, to talk to us about Africa's space and place here at WEF. Thank you very much for joining us, Chido.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Let me start right there and talk about Africa's representation, talk about Africa's story here at the World Economic Forum. It's the biggest one yet in 54 years. A lot more people are here, a lot more engagements are taking place. So one would expect Africa's story to be prominent.
No, absolutely. Africa's story has been very prominent. So as you can imagine, Africa is undergoing seismic change. Between now and 2050, half of the global population growth will come from Africa. 90% of the workforce growth will come from Africa. 1 in 4 people in the world will be African in 2050, and a third of the world's population will be from our region. So it goes to show that Africa is now being more prominent in conversations and shaping contemporary geopolitical dialogues, as well as shaping the global economy, given this momentous demographic shift that we're undergoing. And as a result, we had very, very strong participation this year at this annual meeting. We had our largest delegations ever from South Africa, over 6 ministers, largest delegations ever from Nigeria, again, similarly 6 ministers, vice president, and many other participants. So Africa has been well integrated into our program and is playing an important role this year.
As the head of the African continent at the World Economic Forum, what do investors want from Africa in order for it to realize its promise? And what do investors and world leaders actually want? We're at the coalface of it all.
So there are many things that they want, everything from policy certainty to stability. But I think what they want to see is Africa creating the tools and the environment necessary to attract investment. And Africa is doing that with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So we're actually happy to announce that yesterday we launched the first ever private sector action plan for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We have an initiative called the Forum Friends of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is 40 global companies that are committed to making critical investments, deepening their regional value chains within Africa to support this agenda. And this is a formal collaboration with the Secretariat. So His Excellency Wamkele Mene is a partner of ours in this effort. And so, you know, if we're able to implement this free market, which would be the largest in the world, 1.4 million people, potential GDP by 2035 of 3.4 trillion, it poses significant opportunities for increased FDI, for transfer of technology and knowledge, opportunities to increase competition, to diversify economies, and to scale businesses. So I think that's something that businesses are looking at, and partner companies are quite excited about this opportunity.
Of course, we are having some economic headwinds on the African continent. Some of them homegrown, some of them experiences drawn from outside forces, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the Middle East conflict, and the global economy struggling to get back to pre-pandemic levels. But let's talk about that promise of Africa and the economic headwinds currently, in order for the people who are listening at home to know that we are not shy about talking about our challenges.
No, absolutely. We have to acknowledge the challenges. Last year, 1 in 3 African countries had double-digit inflation, and it was the consequences of the things that you mentioned, whether it's a conflict in Ukraine, some of the conflict that we're seeing on the continent, or in general just the economic malaise worldwide. China's economy is also slowing down. China is our largest supporter of FDI. It is the largest African creditor, so as China slows down, Africa, is linked to China and experiences some of those headwinds, as you mentioned. So the challenges are there, but what's positive is this young, youthful, dynamic, youthful population that we have. And if we find ways to leverage this opportunity, this demographic dividend, which is really, consequential. I mean, to think that 2050, 1 in 3 young people in the world would be in Africa. 90% of the workforce growth in the world is coming from Africa. If we're able to leverage that and to present opportunities for young people, I think we might be able to realize our potential.
Not to sideline some countries, Chido, but let's talk about African countries that hold the most promise, because they are not developed along the same lines at the same pace, but as far as the head of Africa at WEF, which countries for you hold the biggest promise?
Well, I think if you look at the countries that hold the biggest promises, you first have to start with the 2 largest economies, so South Africa and Nigeria. South Africa is the largest, the most industrialized economy in Africa, and so as South Africa goes, so does the continent. So we're certainly looking at South Africa, we're looking at the upcoming elections. South Africa is an important player in the region, and so obviously their success is critical for the region. And then Nigeria. Nigeria is the largest economy on aggregate. They are the largest population on the continent, and by 2050 they're going to be the third most populous country in the world, supplanting the US. So obviously they have all of the elements for the opportunities for growing a big economy. Other smaller economies are doing very well. Rwanda has been very innovative. They're doing incredible stuff in terms of the technology front and really being a frontier market for Africa. And so I'll say probably I could go on again, but those are some of the countries that I could highlight right now. Yeah.
Let's talk about African bottlenecks. The infrastructure bottlenecks are a major hindrance to growth. And when you talk about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or Free Trade Area, it is something that one cannot ignore in terms of this is good on paper. We just need to get the different sovereigns to make the right moves in order to put in the right infrastructure for ports, for communication, for roads. Africa needs almost $100 billion for infrastructure. Are we getting there? Are these countries putting the money aside in order to make this single market seamless and a reality?
So we're not there yet, as you rightly articulated. There still is this incredible deficit that the African Development Bank has highlighted of about $100 billion a year. But what we're excited about is that the World Economic Forum's partners, this forum, Friends of the Afro-Continental Free Trade Initiative, in their action plan. We have companies such as Rio Tinto who are about to start the largest infrastructure project on the continent this year, a $20 billion project in Guinea, which involves rail and other infrastructure. DP World, another one of our partners under our AFCFTA initiative, is investing heavily in ports as well as infrastructure and logistics. They recently invested $1 billion in Tanzania over the next coming decades to manage the port at Dar es Salaam. So the private sector is making these critical investments, and that's a positive sign that the private sector is making these investments. But I think public-private partnerships need to be scaled in order for us to realize this potential. Afrexim Bank, the AFC, Africa Financing Corporation are also making their contributions. But we, as you mentioned, need more capital investment.
As we conclude, the theme this year is rebuilding trust. You have been here for a while experiencing the African experience towards the rest of the world. What have you